Yesterday there was the news that Jim Goad, legendary writer, uh, author of the Redneck Manifesto, the Answer Me zine series of the early 90s, and many other books, has died. He was 65 years old. The circumstances of his death are still somewhat vague. He was not doing well health-wise and seemed not to be in the best of spirits. So, and also there was he actually, the day of his death was June 22nd. So an entire month passed before the news emerged into the greater world about his death. And even now, I think if you go on Wikipedia, they haven't. I mean, you won't see the news that he's died. You'll see his Wikipedia page, and it'll just say Jim Goad, 65 years old, born whatever date he was born. So some oddities. I won't say oddities. Some unusual aspects of his death. But I wanted to just record my thoughts, because my thoughts about Jim Goad are complicated. I had a few, I had a little bit of contact with Goad. I'm not really comfortable calling him Jim. I don't think we were really on a first name basis. But when he was editor of Talkie Mag, and I was writing articles for Talkie Mag, or he was the associate editor. He had some role to play there at the time. This was, I think, around 2011 or so, when I was just starting out. I was mostly writing articles for Alternative Right. I also written a little bit for Countercurrents. Had a couple of my books published at Countercurrents before Countercurrents dropped me. Anyway, so around that time, we were in some contact via internet, and I remember that he wrote an article, "Smells Like Dead Junkie," which was about Kurt Cobain, and that title tells you everything, doesn't it? That's Jim Goad's sensibility. It's funny. It's mean. It's devastating. It pulls no punches. Anything you could possibly like and dislike about Jim Goad as a writer or as a person, you see right there in that title. I remember writing that his article, while I enjoyed it, I didn't quite agree with his take on Kurt Cobain. So I wrote my own article, which was not a rebuke of his article. His article was simply hostile to Cobain. And it was well written. If I if I had been Cobain and I'd read that article, I might have wanted to kill myself after I read it. I mean, that was how effective of a writer he was. If I were still alive, whenever it was that he wrote it. But I remember I wrote a response where I gave my own take on Cobain, and this was really before I started to question the whole suicide narrative surrounding Cobain. Now I definitely don't think that Casey killed himself. Back then I still did. But anyway, I wrote my own article, and in it I referenced his, and I think I referenced it with respect. But he was really annoyed. He was really annoyed by my article. And I don't even remember the points that I made in it. And it's nowhere to be found anymore because Colin Liddell has erased all of my articles from the Alternative Right site. Speaking of us spiteful people. So unless it was reprinted somewhere else, I don't know if you can find it anywhere. But it was a more mixed take on Kurt Cobain, and maybe it was, taking up for him a bit, while at the same time, conceding certain points of Jim Goad's original article. But Goad didn't like it. He did not like it, and I was astounded. I was astounded at the vehemence with which he responded to my article. It'd be one thing if I had written saying, "Don't listen to Jim Goad, he's an idiot. Here's the real truth about Kurt Cobain." But I didn't write anything of the kind. Oh, that's interesting. Just some neighborhood shenanigans, if you heard that. Never mind. So that was interesting. By the way, watch this on 1.5 speed. I know I talk annoyingly slow. I apologize for that. But so he sort of responded curtly and somewhat hostilely to my article. And he was like he was picking a fight. I didn't want to pick a fight with him. I just kind of, I don't know. I kind of made, I guess I made a joke or something and just shrugged and said, well, thanks for your thoughts, or something like that. I wasn't being passive aggressive either. I was just trying to, sort of defuse the situation. Inside, I was kind of thinking, this is unexpected. This guy's a little touchy. So there was that happened. And then I was back in his good graces after that somehow. I don't know why he decided to forgive me or pretend to forgive me. I don't know. I'm not saying I was anything important to him. I barely knew him. He barely knew me. But sometime after that, he also decided he disliked me again, wrote something disparaging about me and about a couple other people who were writing for Alternative Right at that time. And I don't know what I did this time to raise his ire, but let's see. But I didn't take it personally. I just shrugged it off. So whatever, oh well, whatever, never mind. Right? And let it be. It didn't really, and I didn't let it affect my opinion of his writing. Now let me talk about about his writing style for a minute, because Jim Goad was a fearless writer. He covered everything and anything. I think he enjoyed, writing about things that were disgusting or upsetting. He wrote for shock value, and he was good at it. And it was bracing, in the face of political correctness. The Redneck Manifesto is a glorious book. I think it's got some flaws. I think Jim Goad's worldview was not, how do I say this? I think he was someone who just embraced being cynical to the point of nihilism. I don't know whether he was technically a nihilist or not. I know he didn't believe in God. I guess you can disbelieve in God and think that life is meaningless and still not be a nihilist, but I don't know. That seems like splitting hairs to me. I know there are people who are atheists or don't have strong religious beliefs, but who still have or are strongly attached to morals or ethics. I'm not saying religious belief is necessary for a person to have ethics. There are a lot of religious people who are stunningly unethical, and there are a lot of irreligious people who are, extremely ethical and moral. But in Goad's case, I think, he saw the world in very harsh terms. And he was right about a lot of things, because the world is a harsh place. And a lot of what he saw was true. A lot of what he pointed out was truthful. What I found was that, again, all praise for Redneck Manifesto, which I would recommend to anyone. I would also say it was a book in many ways ahead of its time, because it was one of the first documents to express, to point out the anti-whiteism, of the liberal elites, and to take strong exception to it, as opposed to what you tended to hear from, the more mainstream conservative types, which was more, they were like, the white liberals were just openly negrophiliacs, and they shit talked white people all the time. Of course, what they meant by white people was the kind of white people that they hated, i.e. the rednecks, the so-called rednecks, which is a class thing, of course. And Goad was one of the first to point out the hypocrisies of the numerous hypocrisies of white liberal elites. White conservatives, they would tend to more soft pedal, that they wouldn't want to come across as pro-white. They would want to come across as, well, we should just get beyond color. We should get beyond race. That would be what they would say. and so they were afraid of saying anything, you know, that would be construed as racist. Just because if you praise anything that if you praise white culture or anything that white people do, or and so forth, or back then anyway, it's not so much the case now. Now that things have, you know, become much more polarized. Part of that is the backlash to all of the white liberal elitist crap that we've had for so long. But the Redneck Manifesto, you know, well, you know, he wasn't a white nationalist. And I know that people get on his case for that, or you know, think that he's a coward for not joining, for not openly stating he's a white nationalist, or not being a joiner or whatever. You know, I see it as, you know, that he didn't want to commit himself to any movement. And maybe, you know, there's the cynical take on that, which is that maybe he wouldn't want to be a part of any movement unless he was leading it. I think his ego probably wouldn't allow something like that. But also, the better side of it, the more virtuous side of his resistance to joining a cause or a movement, and always just being somebody who's you know, who proclaims his independence, is just that, you know, actually having independence of thought, you know, not having to look around at what other people who are on your side are saying to and, you know, putting your finger to the wind and seeing what was being said by others on your side to see what was you know, appropriate to say, which is something I try to practice myself. Now, you know, like, for example, my most recent video was about the fact that I liked the Odyssey, and I wrote an article about Christopher Nolan's Odyssey and how and why I liked it. And I am aware that in expressing that opinion, I'm, you know, going against the grain of you know, what most others who would be on my side are saying. And that includes people who have seen the movie. There are people who have seen the movie who hated it and thought it was terrible. But anyway, I don't want to get too far off track. My point is, it's good to have independence of thought. It's good to say things as you see them, and not buy into groupthink. You know, not just conform to what others around you are saying, so that people don't get mad at you and accuse you of, you know, being a traitor to the cause or whatever. So I see the positive side of Goad's refusal to be partisan, to be openly partisan. And so there was another time where, I don't know, I like, on my old channel, the one before it got taken down, I think I might have recorded a video where I was critical of something that Goad said in somewhere. Again, it was nothing personal. I didn't make it personal, and I wasn't being. Anyway, you get my point. I mean, I was taking issue with something. I don't even remember what it was. But again, you know, he responded very much the same way, as if I had just slapped his face. You know, this dude could not handle being having someone disagree with him. He could not handle it. You were on, I mean, he put you on his enemies list, and he was very like, when you were his enemy, from what I gather, from what I've seen, from what I've heard, you know, he didn't forget. He never forgot. If you ever crossed him, if you ever said something that if you ever said, I take issue with what Jim Goad says here, then he just hated you forever. I mean, that doesn't seem like healthy behavior. That doesn't seem like a good way to live your life. And I don't think it did Goad any favors, you know, as far as feuds that he got dragged into. You know, I watched one in particular. On it was on the Luke Ford channel, and I mean, it was just embarrassing, and this was long. I mean, it had Goad, and it had people who were attacking Goad, making fun of Goad. I don't think either side really helped their cause very much. I don't think anybody came across looking that good in this feud, in this argument, even though it was arguably, you know, entertaining to watch. It was entertaining to. I was on a long bus ride. My daughter and I were both riding up on a bus to St. Louis. This was in late 2018, just before the new year. We were riding on a bus to St. Louis. My daughter was going to be visiting a friend up there, and so I was going, you know, to tag along, and just to, I stayed in a motel while she was staying with her friend. This is when my daughter was, what, 16, I think, 16 years of age. So I remember listening to that video where Goad was attacking and was attacked by several other people, one of whom was Nick Fuentes, which is interesting. Nick Fuentes just being on Luke Ford's show, and being among all these other, I don't know, early either young millennials or Gen Zers, all these younger people who were just hurling insults and invective at Goad, and he was hurling them back at all of them. And it was just so, it was all very, very juvenile. It entertained me, though, well, on the bus ride, so I should thank them all for that. So yeah, so I was just aware around that time of, you know, that Goad was, he was pushing 60 at the time. He was 65 last month when he died. You know, you're pushing 60, you still want to throw yourself into this kind of, I don't know, juvenile nonsense. I don't think I don't think he was helping himself, but at the same time, Jim Goad had a personality that was he was an extremely charismatic person. You know, he was funny. he was incisive, and he was like a force of nature, and people gravitated to that. Some people did, and that's why even today he's got so many defenders. And in my on the internet, I saw there were a few people who didn't like Goad, who were saying, just sort of rather harsh things like, okay, so he's dead, so what? I'm glad he's dead. He was a miserable son of a bitch, something along those lines. And I don't think this is a good time to express those kinds of sentiments, but I understand having those kinds of sentiments. Because as a friend of mine put it, I think I'm using his exact words here, he was a troubled and a troublesome man. I think you look at his life, I'm not going to go into detail about his life, about some of the, his biography, and if you listen to his own account of his life, it seems that he mostly just he generally comes across as saying, here's all these stupid, ridiculous, crazy people, and all the things they did to me, and I, maybe I didn't always respond in the most exalted or mature way, but basically I have no regrets, and everyone else can go to hell. That was just his whole attitude towards everything that happened to him, which again I'm not going to go into here. I'm not going to go into the details, and I'm sure that it was I'm sure that there were things that about the I'm sure that there was blame to go around. I'm sure that when he was defending himself, he wasn't necessarily just being defensive. I'm sure that there were times when he was was in the right to take issue with this or that or the other thing. But you generally get the title of one of his books is Shit Magnet. One of his and it's an autobiographical account of this particular time in his life. Shit magnet. It's not my fault. I just draw shit to myself. I'm just a shit magnet somehow. I don't know why. A magnet can't help but be what it is, right? I mean, a magnet doesn't draw shit, obviously, but if a shit magnet could exist in nature, it would draw shit to itself the same way a magnet is drawn to metal, right? And I think that's a cop-out. I think you can decide whether to let the shit come to you or whether to remove yourself from the shit. And at some point, you are, if you're a common denominator, then that's on you. To the extent that you're a common denominator of these things. It doesn't exonerate the people around you who have done bad things. But anyway, I would just, I'm only talking about all of this because I think, I mean, I don't, like Jim Goad's not going to get mad at me, and or maybe his ghost will now haunt me for my posthumous, insults, even though I'm not being insulting here. I'm trying not to be insulting. I'm just trying to sort out the good from the bad. And it just came to my mind today reading the eulogies and the anti-eulogies. And what I wrote on social media was just, not that people read me, not that anybody particularly cares what I write, but you still, when you give out, whether or not you're read by a lot of people or your videos are watched by a lot of people, there's still something in the notion of you giving certain vibrations, if you will, out to the world. And you want to be careful about that. You want to guard your heart, and you want to, speak in a way that is responsible. And social media, I've not always spoken responsibly on social media. I found myself getting into stupid little I don't know, shit fights on social media just because I'm annoyed by someone. It's not really conducive to upright dialogue, and neither is the political or social scene generally today. Things are incredibly polarized. I don't need to tell anybody that. And if I were, this isn't, I was anticipating getting hate for saying that I liked Christopher Nolan's version of, or his rendition of Homer's Odyssey. And so far that hasn't happened, but people that has things like that have happened before. People have taken me saying this or that or the other thing and saying, well, that's it. I know you're not, I'm done with you, Nowicki, I'm done. That they just respond very, very harshly to seeing that I like this or that I like this or that I don't like that or whatever. There's a lot of knee-jerk kind of responses, and it's a shame, but it's kind of to be expected in a polarized society where there's an enhanced tribalism, and you kind of are on the lookout for people who are backsliding. You're on the lookout for people who are maybe who you think are on your side, but are really just want to sell out, who would just sell out to the liberals for brownie points or whatever. And I understand that, because there are weaselly people out there, and you can get taken in by weaselly people. You don't want to get taken in by weaselly people. But I think it's gone a little far. And with Goad, what I will say about Goad is that it was never about politics. It was strictly personal. Everything was personal with him. So he got mad at me again for something, and then I actually met him, and I wasn't expecting to meet him. And I'm not going to. I want to protect people's identities here, so I'm not going to say who, but someone who turned out to be a mutual friend was in town, and this person said to me, "Oh, we were going to meet for lunch," and this person said, "Oh, Is it okay if Jim comes? And I was like, sure. Not knowing who the Jim being referred to was. And I thought, well, okay. I'll meet Jim, whoever that is. And then it turned out to be Jim Goad. So Jim Goad was sitting across from me in the booth. The formidable Goad himself was sitting across from me in this Chinese restaurant booth. I said, I didn't know I was being told I was gonna meet Jim. I didn't know it was gonna be the Jim. That's what I said to him. That was my clever line. And he was he seemed kind of embarrassed. He seemed a little embarrassed because he knew that he had expressed some rancor with me, and he said, well, it's okay, it's forgiven, or he said something indicating that he was over it, or that he was that he was sorry. Maybe he said he was sorry. I don't know. He didn't have to like go into some elaborate apology or anything. I wasn't expecting that. He could have just like I said, I was resigned to letting Jim be Jim. And I was delighted to meet him in person, just because he was sort of an idol of mine, even though he had shown himself to be a difficult person in my personal interactions with him frequently. I didn't take that personally, and he was still the man who wrote the Redneck Manifesto, which when I read that in the late 90s, it was a revelation. I was like, wow, this guy's got guts. This guy's, this is somebody to pay attention to. And that was before, you could just find everybody on the internet. I didn't know whether he was going to be somebody who I'd be able to see again, or I'd be able to, I thought maybe his, in the pre-internet days, you could just be a flash in the pan. You could just appear and then disappear. It was a lot easier to disappear, and it happened a lot more often. Some author or some director of a movie, could write something or come out with a movie that you really like, and really made you stand up and take notice, and then he was just gone, and you couldn't just go to a search engine and type in his name. It would be like, oh, he's gone. Anybody know where he went? Where'd he go? A musician, like somebody could write an album that you purchase and you really enjoy. Like in the early 90s, it was, or I think this is the late 80s actually. This might have been 1989 or 1990. Michael Penn's album March, which has the song No Myth on it. That album caught my attention, and I knew that in this case, I knew that he was Sean Penn's brother. He had a brief time in the sun, and then he was just he was gone. It was like, what happened to Michael Penn? Where'd he go? And then 3 years later, he suddenly had a new album out. And I was a cassette guy. I bought everything on cassette back then. So I bought his second album, and wasn't as taken with it immediately at first. And it's sort of like, I don't know, things were different. People or influences could, when you're talking about media figures or authors or whatever, they could just, if they weren't somebody that you knew and that you kept in touch with, then you didn't necessarily, you couldn't necessarily be guaranteed that they would still be visible to you. So, I mean, when the internet got underway and everybody was on the internet and everybody had a Facebook page, or a Twitter page, or when it got to that point, then it was a lot harder for people to just disappear. Anyway, so when I met Goad, it was like, this was back in, when was this? I think it was maybe early 2019, maybe spring of 2019. Yeah. So when we actually met, because he accompanied this mutual friend to lunch, it was a really interesting thing to meet him. And he was friendly and fairly charming, and nothing bad happened. I kind of just, like, when my interactions with him didn't go well, I just somehow knew not to take this personally, or I was able not to take it personally. I don't know exactly how or why, because I'm not going to say I'm somebody who's just can typically be like that. But in his case, I just sort of thought, okay, well, let Jim be Jim. And but anyway, the man had demons, which I don't think we should pretend that he didn't. And that's why I understand the people who hate him. I even understand the people who are using the occasion of his death to, say, to come out and say negative things about him. I mean, it's not very tasteful, but then I could see Jim Goad, doing the same thing if somebody he didn't like died. I don't see him necessarily taking the high road in that situation. Recall Smells Like Dead Junkie. Anyway, I think that's all I wanted to say about this subject. I just wanted to say something and take it for whatever it's worth. Take it for whatever it's worth, because we were sort of, we brushed shoulders. We were in the same hemisphere of the internet, the politically incorrect, right-leaning part of the internet, and I don't know the guy. I don't know his story, so this isn't me trying to weigh in on Jim Goad. I don't know what made him be the way that he was. I think it's unfortunate that he was so swept up by his, what I would only call just vindictiveness or hypersensitivity or whatever. It's unfortunate that had such an effect on him, because he was a real talent. And I think that if he had tried to be something other than just a reflexive, cynic, misanthrope, who was sort of like always trying to impress you with how misanthropic he is. That was the impression I got a lot of the times with his writing. course, he would say, no, I don't care what you think about me. I don't give a shit what anybody thinks about me. That's what he would say. But to me, his writing seemed like it was wanting to get your attention. You know, it was wanting to slap you around, and you know, and when he wrote well, I mean, there is nobody who was his equal as a polemicist, as a satirist. You know, when he was on top of his game, you know, extremely bright, very good with words. You know, I just wonder what he could have been like as a writer, you know, if he had not just sort of returned to the same themes over and over and over again about, you know, the people that he was sick of, and how hypocritical they are, and how sanctimonious they are, and if he had, I mean, I'm not comparing myself as a writer to him as a writer, because I don't think I hold a candle to him talent-wise, but what I would like to do, what I've tried to do in my writing, is not just do the same thing all the time, not just be, you know, enraged and get caught up in my pet peeves and my and how pissed off I am, and just, you know, again and again return to that theme. It gets repetitive. You know, I would probably be a Jim Goad completist. I would, you know, if there was more variety, but it's basically, you know, it's basically the same thing over and over again. Often it's insightful. As I said, when he was on top of his game, he was the best. But he didn't seem terribly interested in ever, for example, writing about love. He didn't seem interested in writing about friendship. He didn't seem interested in writing about God, you know, except that he didn't believe in him, and that, you know, religious people are stupid, evil, hypocrites, which don't get me wrong, a lot of them are. A lot of us are, I should say. I should own being a part of it. But I think he could have really reached some heights if he had lived a more tempered life. Who am I to, of course, who am I to say? I don't claim to be any paragon of generosity of spirit or anything. I've got my demons as well, for sure. But I just think there's so much more to focus our attention on, besides hate and rancor and bitterness and cynicism, and so forth. And I wonder what Jim Goad could have been, as good of a writer as he was. I wonder how much better he could have been if he had not chosen to just get so stuck in the same cycle of recrimination and vindictiveness, you know? So, R.I.P. Jim Goad. I will pray for you, even though you probably, well, now maybe you do want me to pray for you. I don't know. But I'm going to. And I wish you the very best in the realm where you now dwell. And I don't it's doubtful to me that anybody who's close to him is watching this, but if you are, God bless you all, and God bless you and keep you and comfort you in this time of loss.